Across the expanse of the galaxy there were species that thrived in fear, but above them all stood the predators who had long since claimed the mantle of superiority. They were ancient and methodical, their dominance not won through fleeting battles but forged across ages of perfected hunting. Every world they touched carried scars of their hunts, with entire ecosystems twisted to fit their rituals of pursuit and kill. Civilizations trembled at their arrival not because of overwhelming fleets or massive armies, but because once they chose a target, nothing could prevent the chase. Their reputation spread further than their ships could fly. Their name became synonymous with inevitability. Fear was the currency they traded in, and fear never ran short. For these hunters, existence revolved around the thrill of taking down life that resisted. They did not conquer in the way empires did. They stalked, they struck, and they left ruins behind, carrying with them trophies that lined their war halls. Bones, hides, genetic samples, all catalogued as proof of superiority. To them, every galaxy held only two roles, predator and prey. They believed no middle ground existed. They saw themselves as perfection incarnate, sharpened to the point where evolution itself could offer no challenge. Even when rival predators arose, they were swiftly studied, dismantled, and added to the collection of conquered beings. In time, challenges became rare, and the hunt turned ritualistic rather than dangerous. What made them feared beyond their weapons was their psychology. They held no empathy for those beneath them, no hesitation in extinguishing species if the thrill of the hunt demanded it. To them, sapience was no shield, only an invitation to prove superiority over a creature that dared to think it could resist. Civilizations begged for mercy and offered tributes, but to the predators such gestures only marked them as weaker prey. Their arrogance became doctrine, their rituals sacred. Entire generations grew up without the memory of defeat, and so certainty hardened into unshakable pride. Every encounter reinforced the myth of invulnerability. Records across star systems describe the same chilling process: ships arriving silently, scouts unleashing drones to locate the strongest lifeforms, and the beginning of the chase. Few ever saw the hunters directly, for those who did rarely survived long enough to retell it. Yet the aftermath left patterns clear enough. Ecosystems collapsed after apex predators were slaughtered, prey species scattered, and the balance of entire worlds buckled under the weight of the intrusion. They reveled in the imbalance. It was, in their eyes, proof of their rightful place above creation. Galactic councils debated for centuries whether any measure of resistance could slow them, but the conclusion was always the same. They had perfected the hunt too thoroughly. Technology amplified their instincts, but it was not technology that made them unstoppable. It was the unity of culture and biology, every individual trained since birth to stalk, to anticipate, to kill without hesitation. Where empires relied on numbers or weapons, these predators relied on what they believed to be nature's final word, dominance without flaw. To meet them was to accept inevitability. The frail, the strong, the clever, all fell in time. Entire planets abandoned by their inhabitants still bore evidence of the predator's amusement, as if the universe itself were a stage set for their entertainment. Fear of them dictated migration routes, colonization plans, and even diplomatic strategies among lesser species. Avoidance became policy. The predators never negotiated because negotiation implied equality, and equality was an insult to their creed. Yet beneath their endless victories lingered a truth they never noticed. In their long history of conquest, they had come to believe that nothing new remained. The galaxy had shown them every form of life worth hunting, and all had fallen in turn. Their arrogance grew because time had never provided them with a true rival. It hardened into conviction that the hierarchy of life was finished, with them at its peak forever. Their trophies, their rituals, their songs of triumph all reinforced this unbroken narrative. They did not imagine the possibility of something beyond their experience. So when scouts charted a small blue world in a backwater arm of the galaxy, they regarded it with casual interest. Primitive signals, scattered settlements, no visible planetary defense. The reports described fragile primates clinging to survival without claws, without armor, without venom or talons. The data suggested little challenge, almost unworthy of recognition. Yet arrogance demanded no opportunity be ignored. A hunt was scheduled, not out of need, but to maintain the rhythm of ritual conquest. The predators prepared as they always did, expecting to add another record to their catalog, another species reduced to bones and echoes. They entered the hunt with laughter in their throats and certainty in their hearts, convinced the galaxy held no surprises left for them. They had never known fear, and in their pride, they believed they never would. They did not yet realize that in the deep forests, on the endless plains, across mountains and seas of that unassuming world, there lived a species whose instincts mirrored their own, sharpened differently, forged by relentless struggle, and honed by the same universal law they thought only they embodied. For the first time in their long and brutal history, the hunters were about to encounter something they had never considered: predators who hunted apex predators. When the scouts relayed their first assessments, the predators considered Earth little more than a curiosity. To their eyes, the creatures that called themselves human appeared fragile, laughably ill-suited to survival. Their bodies carried no natural armor, their teeth and nails were blunt, their speed unimpressive, their strength limited compared to the beasts of countless other worlds. Observations suggested these primates relied on crude tools and collective numbers to offset individual weakness. To predators who measured worth by physical dominance, humanity seemed unremarkable, barely above the status of vermin. The decision to hunt them came almost casually, as though choosing which quarry to chase before a feast. But what they failed to perceive was the context in which humans had risen. Earth was not a gentle nursery, it was a crucible forged of extremes. Ice ages, searing deserts, treacherous oceans, towering predators, and fragile ecosystems had shaped human evolution into something deceptive. Though the predators saw weakness, they overlooked the greatest adaptation of all: endurance bound to intelligence. Humans were persistence hunters, chasing prey over vast distances until exhaustion felled it. They were strategists who learned to combine patience with sudden, overwhelming action. The absence of claws and fangs was not a handicap but a void filled by invention. Flint, spear, bow, and later iron and fire, each became an extension of will, evolving faster than biology ever could. What appeared soft flesh concealed remarkable resilience. Humans could bleed and heal with startling speed, recover from injuries that would cripple other species, and adapt to climates that destroyed less versatile beings. From freezing tundras to burning deserts, they endured where stronger creatures fell. Unlike beasts bound to narrow environments, humanity turned every hostile land into a home. Their ability to sweat and cool their bodies during exertion gave them unmatched stamina. They hunted creatures larger and stronger, not by overpowering them, but by refusing to tire, refusing to stop. For predators who believed dominance was measured in bursts of strength, this slow, relentless pursuit was beyond comprehension. The scouts also ignored the psychological patterns that made humans distinct. Most prey species fled instinctively from danger, but humans inverted that logic. They studied threats, mapped weaknesses, and turned pursuit back upon the pursuer. Curiosity in them was inseparable from survival. A rustle in the grass was not merely fear, it was investigation. A strange footprint became data to predict the predator that left it. Over generations, this sharpened into cultural memory, encoded in myths of monsters and gods, all teaching lessons in vigilance and cunning. The predators misread stories as superstition when in truth they were survival manuals passed down in allegory. Even more dangerous was humanity's cooperative instinct. While the hunters relied on solitary skill or small coordinated groups, humans built layers of social unity. Tribes, clans, and eventually nations arose, all tied by the impulse to protect one another. Communication, language, and the ability to transfer knowledge across generations gave them something evolution rarely granted: continuity of tactics. A human child could learn in days what had taken ancestors' lifetimes to perfect. Mistakes became lessons, and lessons became traditions. The predators saw disorganized settlements, but missed the invisible net of information binding them together. Then there was the matter of domestication. Where most species adapted to their environment, humans reshaped the environment itself. Wolves became partners, sharpened into hunting companions. Fire was tamed not just for warmth but for strategy, herding prey into traps or fortifications. fields, rivers, and even the seasons bent to human will. Predators assumed superiority meant mastering the self, but humanity proved superiority could mean bending everything else instead. That same instinct, applied beyond Earth, would allow humans to adapt to alien tools and technologies far faster than expected. All of this was invisible to those who came to hunt. Their arrogance built blinders over their vision. They catalogued human physiology but never considered human psychology. They laughed at primitive weapons without recognizing the hands that wielded them had built civilizations from stone and shadow. They assumed fragility meant fear, forgetting that on Earth survival often meant charging toward danger, not away from it. They mistook lack of natural armament for helplessness, when in truth it was the foundation for endless creativity. So preparations for the hunt continued with mockery, their warriors boasting of trophies they would soon mount. To them, humans were another species to be reduced, another myth of conquest to sing about. Yet woven into every boast was the flaw that would doom them, the assumption that the universe had shown them everything. They had not yet realized that this backwater world contained something that mirrored their own creed, but sharpened in ways their culture had long forgotten. They had not yet understood that by mistaking humanity for prey, they had invited predators of a different kind to the game. The first landings began with arrogance disguised as ritual. The hunters chose the densest forests and broadest plains, eager to display dominance across varied terrains. Their war chants echoed through calms as they deployed in small strike teams, confident that no quarry could withstand the precision of their methods. From their perspective, Earth's inhabitants would scatter at the sight of their armor and weapons. What they found instead unsettled them in ways they had never known. The first encounters seemed predictable. Isolated humans were taken, observed, and dismissed. Yet even in these moments something was different. Instead of collapsing into despair, humans studied their captors. Eyes tracked every movement, memorizing patterns, noting weaknesses in armor joints, the timing of weapon discharges, the habits of patrols. When opportunities arose, they did not always flee. Some fought with improvised tools, attacking with calculated strikes, targeting throats, eyes, and vulnerable seams. The hunters called it primitive desperation, but those who survived felt a rare ripple of unease. Then came the ambushes. A team dispatched into the jungle never returned. Search parties found shattered equipment, severed comms, and trails that led nowhere. The conclusion was impossible. The supposed prey had stalked them in return. Hours of silence pressed down on those waiting for reports, until evidence surfaced that the humans had not only neutralized the squad but dismantled their gear. Some fragments were found repurposed into traps. The hunters whispered doubts, quickly silenced by commanders who demanded focus. Yet doubts spread like cracks in a blade. Each new confrontation followed a strange rhythm. Hunters advanced, expecting flight, but instead found themselves observed from the shadows. They felt eyes on their backs, the sensation of being tracked, an unfamiliar experience for those who had only ever been the pursuers. Shots were fired into the underbrush without confirmation of targets, nerves betraying even the most seasoned among them. They had fought beasts of enormous size and strength, yet nothing compared to prey that refused to panic. Instead of fleeing, humans vanished into terrain, reappearing in places that suggested strategy rather than chance. A desert patrol discovered how persistence worked against them. Expecting easy dominance under brutal heat, they underestimated human endurance. Where their armor systems strained to keep body temperatures stable, humans pressed forward tirelessly, circling, cutting off supply lines, harassing with hit-and-run tactics until exhaustion broke the formation. The survivors stumbled back to extraction, muttering about enemies who did not stop, who chased them long after their own stamina had failed. Fear was not spoken aloud, but it manifested in hesitation. The predators began double-checking their movements, questioning readings, and pausing before entering caves or ruins. Their own methods, once flawless, now seemed brittle against an opponent who fought asymmetrically. Humans did not confront them head-on but chipped away at certainty, eroding confidence one vanished patrol at a time. Each disappearance became a story, spreading through their ranks until even the boldest hunters glanced over shoulders more than they admitted. The realization struck slowly but with growing force. Humans hunted in groups with coordination that mirrored the predator's own, but with unpredictability that defied pattern recognition. They adapted after every clash, shifting strategies with speed that seemed impossible for a primitive species. What worked once never worked twice. A trap dismantled in the morning was rebuilt with variation by nightfall. Even children and elders seemed to contribute knowledge, guiding groups with signals and whispers the invaders could not decode. Reports to command grew increasingly frantic, cloaked in technical language to avoid admitting fear. They spoke of resourceful prey, unpredictable resistance, unusual stamina. Behind those words, the truth gnawed at their pride. They had entered this world expecting trophies. Instead, they found themselves bleeding, retreating, and second-guessing their own supremacy. The myth of their invincibility faltered under the weight of an enemy that should not have been capable of such defiance. For the first time in their long history, the hunters felt roles reversing. The forest no longer felt like a stage of triumph, but a labyrinth where unseen eyes measured every step. The plains stretched too wide, hiding movements they could not predict. Night brought no comfort, only whispers of movement beyond the glow of their equipment. Humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was something else entirely, something patient, coordinated, and relentless. The hunters, who had always believed themselves untouchable, began to understand that Earth was not their arena. It was a trap, and they had walked into the jaws of a species that knew how to wait, stalk, and strike. The predators had always thrived on control, but as their presence on Earth stretched from days into weeks, it became clear that control was slipping away. Their hunts no longer unfolded as rehearsed performances of dominance. Each deployment returned with fewer trophies and more losses. Commanders dismissed the early setbacks as anomalies, but the pattern refused to fade. Every encounter revealed that humans were not merely surviving, they were adapting faster than any species the hunters had ever faced. It began with the environment itself turning hostile. Dense forests, arid deserts, frozen peaks, and even urban ruins all seemed to conspire with the humans. Where the predators relied on specialized equipment, humans exploited the land with uncanny precision. In jungles, they used the canopy as cover, striking from above with crude but effective weapons. In deserts, they pushed their stamina past the limits of armored suits, harassing their opponents until heat and fatigue overcame them. In the mountains, avalanches and rock slides erupted where patrols ventured, triggered not by chance but by carefully placed traps. Every region became a new demonstration of adaptability. What unsettled the predators most was the humans' willingness to use anything at hand. A shattered drone became bait for ambushes. Salvaged fragments of armor were reshaped into blades or shields. Even alien weaponry, once thought far too advanced for primitive minds, was studied and crudely modified for human use. They did not wield technology with mastery, but with improvisation that made them unpredictable. The hunters who had once dismissed human intellect as irrelevant now realized that every skirmish educated their enemies, each failure teaching lessons that would be turned against them within days. Psychological pressure built faster than physical resistance. The predators had always relied on the certainty that prey would panic when cornered. Humans inverted this law. They set traps that required their enemies to hesitate, turning confidence into liability. Hunters began to feel the prickling weight of unseen eyes during every mission. No matter how advanced their scanners, they could not shake the sense that they were being watched. Some fired into shadows without cause, others abandoned positions too early, and still more ignored orders in favor of caution. Fear, an emotion long alien to them, began to corrode discipline. The stories spreading among the hunters became more damaging than direct losses. Tales of humans who stalked patrols for days, striking only when exhaustion set in. Accounts of individuals who would not stop pursuit even when wounded, crawling through mud and darkness until their target was dead. Whispers of coordinated groups that vanished into terrain only to reappear miles away with renewed fury. These stories carried a common thread: once a human fixed on its quarry, escape was impossible. Such accounts eroded the myth of invincibility that their culture had carried for centuries. The collapse of confidence was not confined to foot soldiers. Commanders found their strategies failing as well. Human groups anticipated patterns, outflanking maneuvers that had crushed countless species before them. The enemy seemed to learn with collective memory, spreading tactics from one region to another with impossible speed. What worked against a squad in the north was countered days later in the south. The predators who once prided themselves on perfect coordination now found themselves outmatched by a species whose communication and adaptability outstripped even their disciplined methods. Perhaps the most disturbing realization came with the inversion of roles. Hunters reported being tracked, their movements shadowed for hours or days before ambushes struck. For a people who defined their very existence on being predators, the idea that prey could stalk them was intolerable. Yet evidence mounted that humans had mastered this reversal. They knew how to erase trails, how to mask scent, how to anticipate escape routes. The hunters were forced into a role they had never known, prey that could not predict the hunter's next move. The cumulative effect was shattering. Battles that should have been ceremonial victories became drawn-out struggles. Supplies dwindled, morale frayed, and whispers of retreat grew louder. Even victories felt hollow, for every fallen human seemed to teach the survivors new lessons. No defeat deterred them, no loss slowed their determination. Instead of breaking, they sharpened. The predators came to understand the truth they had refused to acknowledge. Humans were not fragile anomalies in the food chain. They were apex predators refined by a planet that demanded cunning, cooperation, and endurance beyond anything the galaxy had prepared them for. The first withdrawals were cloaked in the language of strategy, not defeat. Reports spoke of conserving resources, of shifting priorities, of hunts postponed until conditions were favorable. Yet within the ranks, every soldier knew the truth: Earth had broken the illusion of supremacy. The predators who once announced their arrivals with thunderous pride now departed in silence, unwilling to face more losses. Survivors carried scars and stories that contradicted centuries of doctrine. For the first time in their history, they could not frame their failure as anomaly. It was undeniable proof that their dominance was not universal. Those who returned to their fleets brought back tales their leaders tried to suppress. Accounts of relentless pursuit, of traps sprung from impossible ingenuity, of prey that refused the role assigned to it. In private, warriors admitted to nightmares of human eyes gleaming in the dark, patient and unblinking. Some confessed to feeling hunted even within the safety of their vessels, as though memories themselves had become snares. These stories spread, and though commanders threatened silence, whispers carried farther than orders. The word human became a warning. Among the councils of their civilization, debate raged. Some demanded a full-scale campaign to crush this defiant species, insisting that failure came from underestimation rather than inability. Yet when proposals were drawn, hesitation poisoned them. The thought of mass deployment seemed costly, not in resources, but in pride. If a handful of humans had turned their finest hunters into prey, what would entire armies face? The risk of another humiliation outweighed the promise of victory. Better to mark Earth as unworthy, they reasoned, than to acknowledge fear openly. And so an empire built on confidence carved out an exception in silence, forbidding expeditions to the Blue World not as mercy but as self-preservation. The galaxy took notice. Neighboring civilizations, long resigned to the predator's reign, observed the shift with astonishment. Whispers traveled through trading routes and diplomatic channels. The hunters had faltered. Their defeat was not at the hands of a mighty armada or an ancient rival, but a species dismissed as fragile. For the first time, the invincible image cracked. Some races saw opportunity, others hope, but all regarded humanity with newfound caution. If Earth could repel the galaxy's apex, then Earth was not a world to be taken lightly. On Earth itself, humanity remained largely unaware of the legend being born. Villages, tribes, and scattered nations only knew that invaders had come and been driven back through blood and grit. To them it was survival, nothing more. Yet the predator's own records ensured the story would spread. In their archives, notes once meant to catalog an easy conquest became evidence of terror. Terms like endurance, adaptability, and psychological warfare filled reports that should have described weakness. Their own words testified to a truth they could not escape: humanity was a predator among predators. This realization reshaped the mythos of the hunters themselves. In their songs, once devoted to triumph, discordant verses emerged, whispers of prey that would not bow, of hunts that ended in silence and loss. Elders tried to suppress these stories, but the younger generation carried them as warnings. The creed of perfection had been fractured. They could no longer claim unbroken dominance, for Earth stood as the exception that refused to be erased. The greatest wound was not physical but existential. The predators had defined themselves by fearlessness, by the certainty that nothing in the universe could mirror their hunger. Yet on a world they dismissed as primitive, they had found reflection. Humanity had revealed that the qualities they worshipped were not unique, but shared and honed by others in ways they had forgotten. To admit this was to accept vulnerability, and vulnerability was the very thing they despised. And so the legend solidified. Across star systems, in hushed tones, beings spoke of humans as something to avoid. Not because of technology or numbers, but because of what they represented, an apex species forged by struggle, cunning, and patience, willing to chase even gods until they fell. For the predators who once believed themselves eternal, the truth was inescapable. They had feared nothing until Earth. Now they feared the memory of eyes in the dark, of footsteps that never ceased, of prey that refused the script. Humanity had taken their creed and made it their own. The hunters would never forget, because once they met the apex predators of Earth, they could no longer pretend they were alone at the top.